we are going to talk about how to use Notion for travel. Let's start. I already have a template that it's already in the Notion marketplace if you want to have a look at it. And this template, it's all about enjoying one specific trip. I really like this template because it ensures that all the information I want for the trip, it's here and can be accessible easy both from computer but also from my mobile. Because when I thought about creating this page, I actually thought about me going on my phone and checking all this information of my phone. We will talk about that also in another video, about how to optimize Notion pages from your phone. So the idea is you have this database where you have today's plan, the past activities you already did, and the brainstorming of some activities you still haven't planned in which day of the trip you want to do. Then we have some quick adds. So this button allows you to create a new activity, add a new restaurant, add a new packing item. And all the databases are actually here. So for example, if we go to places and activities, it's all here. And then in this initial page, you also have some stuff you might not want to forget. The map of the location you want to go to. What I actually like to add is my map created on Google Map with all the items colored, coded, depending on the day. But this is because I'm a freak. And then some important documents and the itinerary for the day. I really like this database, but I think it still can be improved. And the major problem, let's say, with this dashboard is that it's like a standalone. We don't have the possibility to see all the other trips I'm organizing or my past trips or my travel journals about other trips that are not this one, because this one is like, let's go to Barcelona. But what if today I want to plan a trip for London? I have to duplicate this and then do the same. But then my databases are not connected. So what we are gonna create today together is actually a travel dashboard where we can have all our trips in one specific place. We are gonna start and have this as a base, but this is gonna just be the template of our upcoming trip. The idea in general is to have a dashboard that also connects all the trips together. So today we're gonna do specifically that. We're gonna do it together because I want to show what my thinking process is, because maybe you can also learn from that or you can challenge me. So let's start. The first thing I do when I create a new dashboard or database is to list the things I want to track, share, and in general also the visual I want to have at the end, so how I want this to look like. So the first thing I want, it's a full database of all my upcoming and past trips. Then I also want a database with all the activities I did in all my trips. I also want a database of restaurants and accommodation. This is because I love to recommend things to my friends, so then maybe if they want to go back to that place, then I can just go and check it out very easily in my full comprehensive database. Starting thinking about the visual aspect of it, I want to have the first part about upcoming trips and also some ideas on what my future trips can be. And then I want the second part of my dashboard to be more about my past trips. I want to have this as a gallery view because I love to visualize all of this. And then we're gonna also add some formulas here and there so that it will look so much nicer. And then I want a navigation bar on the left side so that when I go through this dashboard on my phone, it's easier to navigate and it's easier to scroll and skim and then just reach the page that I want. Now that we have a full list of what we want from this dashboard, we are ready to start creating. The first thing I see is that I will need more than one database. I will need to create relations in databases, maybe formulas just to make it look nicer, and then also some links, databases links, so that I can link in my navigation bar, maybe some buttons to make the whole experience much easier. Let's start with the main database, the database that will contain all my upcoming and past trips. We are going to create a new database. We're going to call it trips. Maybe I also have to start doing this myself a little bit more but I would suggest you to use specific name for databases because it's very useful for when you look for pages and databases in your Notion. So then I'm actually gonna change this to all my trips database. Of course, we can hide this title, and then I will open it and add an icon. I will add the same icon as my travel dashboard one. The way I create databases normally is that I always create it in a table format, and then I decide which view I want to show, because table is just much easier to handle at the beginning at least. Let's start with creating our first trip. Let's do a trial run and understand which properties we want to add. My upcoming trip is to London, so let's start with that. We can create a new page, call it London trip. Of course, we are gonna add an emoji. We're gonna put this emoji. And then let's think about the properties. The first thing I want is to know the date of my trips. We're gonna put a date. Then I would also suggest to include the end date. So then it's actually like start and end all together. I'm gonna put random dates here, so 24 until the 2nd. Something else I want is to have a reference for which country this trip was made to. It would be cool to have a relation database, but for now we're just gonna make it a select type of property. So I create a select property and then just add the tag England. We also want to add a formula that tells us how many days I still have to wait for my trip to arrive. Your best friend, when you want to write a formula that it's a bit more complicated than a normal formula, just like 2 + 2, your best friend is the let's function. The let's function allows you to create variables in your code, so then you can refer to them without having to write the whole line again. Our first variable, it will be called upcoming, and it's gonna be a message that tells us how many days we still have to wait. To create a variable with the let's function, you just write the name of the variable, you put a comma, and then you add the value that you want to assign to that variable. In this case, we want a text. Actually, we don't just want text, we also want a number that will vary depending on our now and the upcoming trip date. In this case, we're going to use another function that it's called date between, and it will calculate the date between our trip, so the date, and now. And what we want is that we want to know the difference in days. How do we know if this formula is working? Well, we just call our function again. So it says this trip will start in 5. Yes. Then I would also add a plus to add another part of these days. So it says this trip will start in 5 days, but it's odd because it doesn't have a space, and so we are gonna add a space now. Now that we know like the message that we want to show, I actually would like to have 3 different messages. One if the trip is upcoming, one if we are on the trip, third if the trip has already passed. In this case, we're going to create other 2 variables. Now that I've created these 3 variables, we see upcoming, on the trip, and past. Now I want to create an if function that tells me which message I have to show, depending on the condition we are at. In this case, we have to check if the date is in the future, in the past, or currently. Now I've created my 3 possible outcomes. The first one is that the date is greater than now. This means that the date of my trip is later than now, and so it's an upcoming trip. If the date is before now, so then it's past trip. Or if the date is equal to now, the start date of my trip is actually today, or if today it's between the start date and the end date. In this case, we are on the trip. Let's save and let's check all of these variables. So the first one is the trip is upcoming. Correct. This trip will start in 5 days. What if the trip is starting today? Okay, we are having a problem because it says your trip happened 0 days ago. And this is because the first thing it does is to check the first item, then check the second item, and then check the third item in the if functions. So then if we move these above, we shouldn't have the problem anymore. because now it says have fun on your trip. And if the trip is upcoming, it still says the trip will start in 5 days. What if the trip has already passed? It says your trip happened 15 days ago. So now the formula, it's working. So we have the base of what we want inside of our database. Something else we want is to have a template so that every time I create a new trip, it will show like this. So how do we do that? We first have to create our base database, so the activity database, the restaurant and accommodation database. And then we're going to create a sample that connects with this one thanks to relation properties. So other two properties we will need here is the relation properties that we can only create if we already have the other database existing. So let's create those databases. I've created these two databases called restaurant during my trips and accommodation during my trips. Now we can create the relation property. We have to find the database we want to relate. We can add the two-way relation, and then the property name will be called accommodation. Maybe there is one more. And then the related property will be called trips. That's okay. We also add another relation that is called restaurant during my trips. This is called restaurants. And then we add the two-way relation and we add the trip one. Amazing. Now we see that we have the relation both here and here. Now we have the base database. Let's check what other properties I had in these databases. So there I had the tags property and a Google map. Okay, I also want that, so let's do that. I added them. Now let's check what I had in the accommodation database. I also had the Google map, the check-in date, checkout, and the price. Amazing. Let's do that too. Maybe you don't know, and I will show you now how you can have the price showing directly the number of like the money. So you have to check number format, and then instead of number you have to go and decide which is the thing you want to show. For example, I'm in Europe, so I will show euros. And in this case, if I write a price, it will definitely already have the euro symbol. Now that I already have all the databases created, let's create our template. To create a new template, we go here, then we push the create new template. This template will be called new trip. We don't want to fill any of this property already, because otherwise every time we create a new trip, it will already have a property filled in, but this might change and probably will change depending on your trip. And then let's open this wide and let's do I will do a bit of back and forth between the template I already created and this one we already want, the new one we want, so that I can create it very similar to that. Actually, what I will do is that I will just copy paste for now, and then we will handle it from there. Something I definitely forgot is to create the activities database. Let's do that before actually continuing creating the template. These are all the properties that are now in the activity database. So the date of my activity, some pictures, the price, if the activity was a restaurant, like includes a restaurant, and the type of activity. Okay, let's do that. I actually decided not to put the picture property because I like to add the picture inside of the activity and places on my trip, because I also like to journal about it. So there are two ways we could do this, is actually create a journal entry for each trip and create a whole journal for our trips, or then we can just write something in the activity that is connected to our trip. For now, we are gonna have this solution. Another version, you could think about create another database for your journal entries that could also be cute and connected with your already existing journal that I for sure have on Notion. I don't know about you. Yeah, for sure. I forgot about adding the relation with the trip here on my activities, so I will do that. And now we can go and check and modify our template here. So the first thing is that I will check the buttons. So now it says add activities, amazing. Then I don't actually want to add a property, like a restaurant property. So I will remove this. I will also remove the name because I don't need it. But then I will add, okay, for the trips, I will add this page, because this page means, if I show you what this page means, is the page containing this button. So that's amazing. That's what we want. And then I will open the page that I just added in center pick. Let's do the same for all the buttons. In this template, we also have the packing items. This is also cool. I think it's relevant, but we are not gonna have a main database for the packing items. We are just gonna have a database for the packing items inside of each trip, if that's okay for you. Otherwise, you could also have like a whole database for your packing items, but then it would be a bit like check and uncheck and check and uncheck. But we could create a button to just check all of them and uncheck all of them. So that could also be cool. So this doesn't really need to be modified. Now we have to change this activity to the actual database we want to show. We're gonna link to an existing database that in this case is activities. We're gonna create a new table. This new table will be, let's recreate what I had here because I liked it, like a list view. And I'm gonna hide the title. And then in the list view, I also will create the other views that you see. So it's again, activities on my trip, but it's a new view that it's a gallery. The page preview is the page cover. I will wrap the properties and that's done. I will also hide the database title. And then the last one was a table with the brainstorming ideas. So I'm gonna create an empty view with existing databases table, and this view will be called brainstorming. Amazing. We are gonna also hide the database title. So in order to do that, you actually have like to change everything about and erase this database, and then we have to change all of these databases. So the idea is that you actually create this from scratch. What I did is just take something I already had because it was easier for me. But the thing I wanted to also change is that I don't really want to have this do not forget list and also the important documents, so that in this case I will just add this like large, erase this column and make it large so that I have a view of my map. Normally, as I said, I use the map that has color coded with all the tags. And then here I would also change this with the itinerary view that is the activity database here, but just in a different format. So for the activities, what we have to actually take into account is that the filter of this has to have as trip the new trip template, because otherwise it will show you all the activities that you have always done, like all the past activities with all the trips. But if you actually take the filter and create this relation property and filter by the template, then it will just show you nothing because you still haven't created any activity for this trip. But then it will show you only when you actually create an activity for a trip, then it will show you only the one you created for this trip. I will show you how it works in a second after I put all these filters here that are really, really, really important. Okay, now that we have the template, let's try and set this as the default for all views in trips and then create a new page. Okay, now we have a new trip. Let's try using the buttons. So the first activity I will do in this new trip is go to the beach. Let's go to the beach and it will appear here in my activity list. And let me show you also that here, if I create a new trip, it will not be showing that activity here because it's not related to the London trip, that is this one, but it's actually just related to the new trip that it's here. In fact, I don't have any activity related with this entry. That's amazing. This means it's working. This is also the same for restaurant and accommodation. Of course, you always have to tweak these relation properties so that they work. Of course, when you create the template, you have to make sure to filter by these relation properties as I showed you and make sure that it works before actually using it for real. So always do a trial run, in my opinion. So for the navigation bar, we'll do something similar to this one. So it's gonna be a toggle. Why should it be a toggle in my opinion? Because if you look at it on your phone, if it's not a toggle, then you have to scroll a lot. But if it is a toggle, then you don't need to scroll a lot. you can like click it and it will hide itself. So that's amazing. That's what we want. To do a navigation bar, what we do is that we create a 2-column block. In this 2-column, we are going to create this toggle that it's called navigation. We are actually going to make it title 3, and then we are going to create a toggle out of it. Amazing. We want to have it as a heading, both because it's bigger and then because it will appear on your table of contents. Amazing. So how do we do the navigation? We actually write what we want. So for example, I suggest that we create a page that contains all the databases as I did here. And then you can just roam around the databases from here, and it has like a nice navigation bar and all of this. But how do we create a navigation bar? So you actually write the text you want, and then you link that page to the text. For example, let me show you. We're just gonna make an example here, and then I will show you the final product in the end. But for example, one thing could be all my trips, and then we can link this database. We highlight this, we put a link, and then we copy paste. If we go here, all my trips, it brings us to the trip database. Of course, it doesn't look nice yet, but it will look in the end. Okay, I will do all of this and then show you how it looks. See you on the other side. And we are back. This is the final look of the dashboard. So what I did is that I created a navigation bar, as I said, with the toggle. Then I also added a little map where next with the toggle itself also. Then I've added a callout block with a title upcoming trips with the filter. So this is the same database as before, but the filter says that the start date is after today. So like it's upcoming. Actually, to have entries in these upcoming trips also when we are on the trip, it would be useful to add another filter that says if today is between start date and end date. This is also something we could consider. I have shown 3 properties: the date, the country, and the little message we added. And as we see, we can have like upcoming trips and past trips. Then if we go to each of these, it's a database with the navigation bar, and then with the button that brings me back to my travel dashboard with a little message also, as you say, like, want to go back? Yes, or no thanks. And then here is just a view of your trips with the table also, so you can like look of all your accommodation, restaurants, the countries. It would be cool to also create another view that has like, depending on the country, so it's grouped by country. That would also be a cool way to show data. Then we have the same I've done for the accommodations. Of course, it's all empty for now, but yes, I've done the same for accommodation and restaurants. And then as we did before, I have the template new trip here. And something else I wanted to highlight is that this upcoming trip is also a heading 3, because in this way I can go to the table of content and just go fast through my page, and this is just easier to navigate. This is everything I wanted to show you about my travel dashboard and the way that you can modify a template that you already have that is like a standalone, and then just make it into a bigger template, a bigger dashboard with much more databases. And of course, how could I not end this video by telling you something that we could already improve? The first thing would be to add a journal entry, so a journal database that is actually connected with your normal journal. So it would be like a travel journal that also speaks to your normal journal in Notion. That would be very cool in my opinion. Then we could also add another database that is countries. So it's a database where you have all the countries, and then you can go and up in the country and see all the trips you've made in that country. This can also be done with a different view in the all trip database depending on tags, but having just a database for countries would also be cool. And then I would say that we could improve the way that this page looks like. I've already done some changes, like for example, I have customized the layout, putting aside all the relation properties because I don't want to look at it when I enter this page. So then now the only thing I can say is date, country, and the little message we have. But something that we could improve is, for example, like this map maybe it's not useful to have it so big, so we can like resize it so that when you use it on the phone it's easier to navigate. And then the itinerary, it's very cool to have it like that, but maybe that could be something to improve too. And yes, that's everything I wanted to say. I hope you liked this video and I hope you learned something new. So please leave a comment with all the new things you learned today. See you!